Hello, Blockheads. Lissa Alexander, and I'm back with Block 28. After this one, we only have 2 more to go. I can't believe we're almost to the end. Today, I am sharing Chelsi Stratton's block. It's called Morning Glory. This is my little 6-inch version, but I'm going to show you how to do the 12-inch. And by now, you've done the half square triangles, you've done foundation paper piecing, you've pretty much done everything. So I'm just going to show you a couple of other tips and different ways to make things along the way. Download your pattern in the link below and gather your supplies, and we'll get ready to sew. The first step we're going to do is make our half square triangles. You can choose to do it the conventional way. I am going to show how to use triangle papers. I love them for their accuracy, and I like to do everything that's mindless. Just get in there, sew it, repeat the process. I've cut my lights and my darks about 6 inches, and they are going to finish at 2-inch half square triangles. Spinning stars, each paper actually is designed to where it makes 8 half square triangles. So if you were doing ideally a monkey wrench or a hole in the barn door, several different patterns that need 8 triangles, these are perfect. Really the trick there's a couple different tricks with this one. If you put your 2 fabrics right sides together, always put your light fabric on the top, facing down, and I'll show you why that in a minute. So I pin my paper in a couple of different places, and always start where she says, tighten your stitch length a little bit to make it a little smaller, and you're just going to sew in continuous all the way around on the dotted line. So I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and do that now for you. And I'm also sewing in a bright thread so that you can see. Obviously, normally you probably wouldn't be sewing in a bright thread, but I'm just doing that so it shows up for you. We're trying something new. Here's a new camera angle and close-up, so I hope that doesn't distract you, but that's going to give us a great view of the sewing. So I'm super excited about that. And so we're going to start here, and normally I would be sewing pretty fast, but I'm going to kind of take my time on this. You just sew down to where the solid dot is and stop. I sewed a stitch over, which is definitely okay. I'm following the 2. Now 3. Say you've worked a long day and you're ready to get home and have your therapy of sewing. This is just mindless ways to make triangles, plus you don't have to count. You know, every single one of your papers makes 8, so if you need 16, you'd use 2 sets of papers. So that's what I mean by mindless, repetitive sewing. And it does work perfect for this pattern because you need 8, which a lot of the blocks throughout the whole Blockheads series needed that quantity, so that was perfect. So here we go, and we're done. And now I'm going to show you how to cut. I'm back at the cutting table. There's so many different options on how you can do this. Sometimes I like to use the spinning mats. There's something about the Olfa mats that actually makes them a little sticky. Some of the other mats, the cutting slips and slides, but I don't really have a problem at all with being able to cut using this Olfa mat. We've sewn on the dotted, we're going to cut on the solid. My first cut is around the perimeter, and I'm going to cut here, and then ideally without moving the block. This is where if I was using a rotating mat, I would probably keep twisting and turning. But what I like about this is it is a little more efficient because you're not having to, putz with a lot of this stuff. And before I cut the rest of this away, I want to show you that one of the greatest tips about this whole entire thing is this little step here. Whether you do it at this stage or at this stage, you want to go up to where this line is, across to where your 1/4 of an inch is, across and down. So see how I've cut here, here, and here? I would do that on all 4 corners, and what that actually does is it saves you from those pesky little dog ears or all that little extra triangles that you have to trim off after the fact. So I'm going to just keep on and come on over here and finish cutting this one and show you what that looks like. If you're comfortable doing it with a rotary cutter, you can. I just like to just sit and do that with a good sharp pair of scissors. Cut 1/4 inch up, 1/4 inch up, and then where the dot is your next 1/4 inch, and I just cut over. And you do that to all 4 sides. I learned this on a retreat. One of the girls at the retreat had one of these hung on her bulletin board, which I thought was kind of bizarre, but she literally just had like this hung on her bulletin board, which was a reminder to her how to do this. And I also now have one of these hung on my bulletin board, so I can always remember, now what part do I trim away? So once I've gotten rid of all of those, I'm just going to come back in and trim, continue to trim on the solid lines. And these papers definitely have some forgiveness, just like in sewing. None of us actually always sew an exact perfect 1/4 inch. So if you're off a little bit, either on your cutting or your sewing, it's okay. It all still kind of works out. But then you don't have all those little pesky dog ears to do that with. So now I'm to the point to where I'm going to show you how come I put the light fabric on the top. So I go over to the ironing board, and the reason I keep my paper on and the light on the top is when you go to iron, all you have to do is press away with your dark. And the nice thing is the fact that this still has the paper on it, that gives you a little more something to hold on to do that. So you press them all to the dark, and because you've used a tighter seam allowance, you put your thumb right here and you just tear it off like it's a tablet. And it's so easy and fun, and they're so perfect. I just love them. And you don't have to oversize your triangles and trim down. You don't have to deal with that. I hate cutting 1/8 inches, which a lot of times the triangles have that kind of measurement with it. I'm gonna go press these and we'll be right back. I'm back, and I have all my parts for my corner units. Because this section is the same in all 4 places, I like to stack them up. And again, mindless, repetitive sewing. If you sew it wrong, you're going to sew it wrong all 4 times. So make sure your first one that you sew is right. But I'm going to join this unit to this unit, this to this, and then across from there. I'm going to do that, and we're going to come and talk about the next step. I'd finished these units, set those aside, and now we're on to our flying geese. The measurements on the flying geese are, again, 1/8 inch. I do round up a little bit with that and then trim back, and there's nothing wrong with that. You have a little bit more room actually to square up your geese. I'm going to take my big square, and this situation is 5.5, lay 2 squares on top, and mark diagonally from end to end here. One thing that you can do too, if it gets fairly big, is also use this outside line here to make sure that you're going straight, and then that's going to give you a nice diagonal line here. And you're going to sew 1/4 inch on either side of your line. Come in here, and same thing. I'm lining this up here, the edge line. I shut my cutter this time. Then, again, this is darker. I'm going to press away. Let me iron it, and I'll be right back. Here is my next unit. I have 2 of these units. I'm going to repeat the same process, add another square to the top, mark diagonally, sew 1/4 inch on each side, and cut. This one big square and 4 corner squares is actually going to make you all 4 of your geese. So that's kind of a nice mathematical way not to have to worry about how many little pieces do I need to cut, how many little parts do I need to put together. Then, since I oversized my pieces, I'm going to come in and trim it all down to where I need this to be 2.5 by 3.5. And my first trim is always that I'm going to have 1/4 of an inch across the top. So here's 1/4 of an inch. The ruler on top of this, obviously this looks quite wonky because I oversized it, but once I've lined up, this is 1/4 of an inch away from here, then I'm also going to make this be my center point and not necessarily pay attention to the outside edges or this bottom edge because I'm going to trim that part away also. Then I need to go 2.5. And again, this is going to look weird because you have all this extra fabric here, but now we're going to come back. I like to use, this ruler's 4.5, so that's, I know exactly this is what measurement I need. And then I can also make this middle line go right down the middle at 2 1/4, and lining up a diagonal line as a guide there, trim away on both sides. And there I have a perfect flying geese unit. So you make 4 of those, and then we're on to our next task. So I have my geese unit, and you're going to need to sew 2 of those to a sidebar there. And then now I'm moving on to the middle, which is a snowball block. So large square, 4 smaller squares on the side. Whether or not you mark diagonally from tip to tip and sew on one side or not, I'm using one of my favorite rulers, which is Doug Leko's. It's a mouthful, mini simple folded corner ruler, and it comes in a couple different sizes. I believe it's only available at quilt shops, so if your quilt shop doesn't carry it, ask them to order it for you. You'll love it. So it's very easy just to mark where the line is, would be where you would have drawn, and you trim away the excess, and then you sew from end to end. And it gets rid of that little point also that makes it tricky. Let me trim the rest, and then I'm going to sew it together, and I'll be right back. I'm back. I'm almost finished. I have all my parts and pieces here together. Center snowball block. I've added the outside pieces to this. The next step will be, we're going to start actually finishing off this by adding a geese to this side and a geese to this side. Sew these 2 together. There's 1 row. Then our geese with the extra bar here. One, 2, 3, and the same here. 1, 2, 3. You're going to join here and here. That's 1 row. Add these 2. That's your 2nd row, and add so here and here, your 3rd row, and then join these across from here. And then when I get to the very end, so that it lays nice and flat, I do press my main seams open because that's where the majority of the bulk of the fabric is. So I'm going to go sew this up, and we'll come look at the finished block. Ta-da! Here's my 12-inch block. As you can see on my quilt in progress, I'm using 6-inch blocks and then some 9-inch blocks. But I'm going to do, as Annie calls it, a party back. I'll do something fun with all my 12-inch blocks on the back of my quilt. Thank you to Chelsi for designing this quilt block. It was tons of fun, and I definitely liked playing with my fabric layout. So again, thanks, Chelsi. Happy quilting and sewing.
Love it. Cut.